This was an extraordinary journey, one that I did not anticipate, and that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. So I got a call, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, from a friend of mine at Harvard. And he said, "You're going to China?" And I said, "Yeah, how do you know?" And he said, "Because the Chinese government just called me." Now, why would they do that? Because Beijing puts a lot of people in the Kennedy School at Harvard, where I received a master's degree. And they do a lot of business, China, with Harvard. Very prestigious for a Chinese government official to attend Harvard University. So they keep an eye on things, and they knew that I was an alumni. Now, how did they know I was going to China? Because I made a reservation at the Four Seasons Hotel across an American embassy, and everybody who's from America that goes in there, the Chinese government knows within 2 hours. Isn't that interesting? China is the most intense surveillance state this world has ever seen, by far. And I document that in my column. And again, I hope you read it. So anyway, the offer was we would like Mr. O'Reilly to come to Beijing to do a seminar, a question and answer with some Chinese government officials who are very worried about the second Trump administration. So I said, okay, because that's my job, right? My job is to look out for you by being a journalist and assembling facts, and also to look out for my country. So I'm going in. And I did. It worked out great. The Chinese are very, very respectful to me, and the rules were simple. Everything was off the record in the sense that no quotations and no names mentioned except mine, which is all right with me. They videotaped the entire, it was close to 2 hours. But if they use it, any of it, then I get to use it too. That's the deal we have. And I do believe they will adhere to that deal. The reason they taped it was there were even bigger shots watching this on closed circuit. Okay. Now, when I go in, I tell the truth, but I was not as bellicose as I can be. And I told them I wouldn't be. I said, I'm not here to debate you on policy. That's not what I'm here to do. You want to know something about the USA or President Trump, I will answer your question. If I don't know the answer, I will tell you, but I'm not debating. So tariffs and all that, not my job to debate. My job is to tell you what's happening in America, which I did. They accepted that. And they asked good questions. But it took a turn when I said, I have a proposal for you, which I've been working on for a while, and it's called the Partnership for Peace and Prosperity between the United States and China. And I laid it out, and they were stunned. I said, if the United States and China were to ally together and control the crazies of the world, Iran, Putin, other insane things, North Korea, if we were to establish an economic partnership that led to stability, that would be an unbelievable thing. Now, most Americans do not know that China and the United States is the most important story by far in the world. You mention China, their eyes glaze over. They don't pay attention. They want to hear about Puff Daddy. They don't know. This is by far the most important story for you, because what happens with the United States and China will influence how much money you get and how much money you will keep. And it is a life and death situation. Again, it is not my job to make policy for the Trump administration, but I laid out a pathway where both countries could work together. I did inform President Trump I was going, and yesterday I debriefed him for 30 minutes on the telephone. That was off the record. I cannot tell you what I said, but he got pretty much everything you're going to get, okay, including the columns. And the president listened very intently and asked very good questions, which he always does when I talk to him. And I'm not patronizing anybody. I'm telling you the truth. Anyway, by far the most important thing to the Chinese government is Taiwan, not the tariffs, and not the day-to-day, you violated this, you can't have Chinese students, this is that. Nah, all of that can be taken care of. Taiwan is the big one. And I basically said, after they came at me with Taiwan, I said, look, the United States government under President Trump is not going to let you invade Taiwan and take it over without a brutal, and I mean that literally, a brutal reprisal. Donald Trump does not want to look like a weakling. He doesn't want to look like President Biden. And this was interesting. The Chinese government had no use for Biden at all, calling him weak and unfocused. No use. They're happy Trump's in there because they think they might be able to get some deals out of this. Now, when I was driving around China, because we went up to the Great Wall, and all the pictures are on BillO'Reilly.com, I didn't see one American car. My son saw a couple. I didn't see any in Japan. I didn't see any in South Korea. So that whole tariff thing is real. There are no cars for Americans in there. And China's 1.5 billion people, 5 times our population. Now, I'm going to read you some questions coming up. A lot of people don't understand why the Chinese people allow this surveillance communist state, because they have never for one day known freedom. In their entire history, China has never known a day of freedom. It's exactly the same thing in the Revolutionary War, and 50% of the colonists, the Americans, supported the king. It drove George Washington crazy. And John Hancock and Samuel Adams, they couldn't get the Tories, they were called, to support the revolution, because those people never knew a day of freedom. They were under the king in England. They come over here, we got freedom. What's freedom? In Beijing, the concept is just, why? They don't have a free press. They don't see, every single thing is controlled. When you are born in China, you get an ID card, okay? You have to carry the ID card in your diaper, okay? If you don't have it and the authorities stop you, you're arrested. Every Chinese has to carry an ID card every second of every day. And that's just the start of it. They confiscated 2 of my pens for no reason. Woman was about 22, goes, I'm taking your pens. In Chinese, I had a translator. I said, why? I'm a journalist. What am I going to write with? Took the pen for no reason. And I'm that small ball, but just give you an idea. So anyway, on the Taiwan thing, I said, this can be worked out. The year 2049 is the 100th anniversary of Mao Zedong's takeover, communist takeover. That's when the government wants Taiwan in the fold, but they're going to have to carve out autonomy for Taiwan for the West to go along with it. It's doable. Hard. Very hard. Tariffs are hard. All of this is hard. Joining us now is a guy I personally requested to analyze my utterings about China, because I think he's one of the smartest guys in the country, and he's an honest man as well. He's Victor Davis Hanson. You know him. He's a syndicated columnist. He works at the Hoover Institution, which is on the campus of Stanford University, right, Professor? That's where your Hoover is, right? Okay. So and there are tons. There was only one woman in the, and these were hard men, by the way, in the room where I gave the seminar. About 14 of them, 13 men, 1 woman, who was a Stanford grad. Very articulate woman, powerful woman. The other guy, she put the other guys to shame. because she understood a little bit about the flow in and out of the USA, where a lot of them didn't. They really, they were very hardcore Maoists. Anyway, you've read my column, you listen to my bloviating here. What say you?
Well, I think China has if you compare if we are in a Cold War, and a lot of people think we are, and you compare that to the Soviet Union 50 years, China has a very different place in the relationship with the United States. We had no Soviet students here. We had no trade agreements. It was a Cold War. But I would like to see more of a normalization of what I think is kind of an aberrant. We have 300,000 students. At Stanford, we just have a series of Stanford Review articles revealing that there was an organized espionage group of students. We had a member of the People's Liberation Army on the faculty as a visiting neuro scientist about 4 years ago. The Confucius Institute was shut down. The DeVos first-term Trump Department of Education fined Stanford for not reporting a lot of contributions. So I guess what I'm saying, Bill, is that the view of George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, and to a greater extent, Obama, that the more engagement you have with China, they were going to be impressed with American culture, tolerance, and they were going to emulate us, and then they would.
That's not happening.
No, it's not happening. It's not happening. So I think the Trump position was that we had given them a sense of appeasement or laxity, and our magnanimity was reciprocated by
aggression,
taking advantages of rather than reciprocity. And I think right now we're in a period where, when you look at China, they're building 3 or 4 nuclear warheads a month, and they plan to get up to about 1,200 in 5 years. They have violated, and we don't have much success with them on copyrights, patents, dumping of product, currency manipulation. I would like to think that maybe Hong Kong would have been an example for Taiwan, but when you look what's happened to Hong Kong, Jimmy Lai is in prison, and they pretty much suppress free speech. So I guess what I'm saying is, because of World War II and we have a large Chinese population here, there was a natural empathy for closer relationships. And it wasn't the Cold War, Truman, Eisenhower Cold War. There was a real opportunity, the Americans thought, to reach out to China and to give them indulgences that we didn't other countries that we had been.
Yeah, it worked for a little while. It worked for a little while, but then Xi got in, and Xi is, Xi's personal legacy is tied in with Taiwan. Do you believe? I said that I came up with this Partnership for Prosperity and Peace, and the reason that I did is because China has to feed 1.5 billion. They're hurting. Okay, their economy needs the United States. That is the big leverage we have over them. And they are willing to make a deal, I believe. Do you believe that?
I think they're willing to make a deal in the economic realm, because they're suffering kind of a historic phenomenon that the more they have upward mobility, rather than the population being satisfied, it's just a human trait, human nature. They're even more ambitious for a better life, and it's very hard to fulfill the expectations of the Chinese growing middle class because they're not spending what they should on domestic.
No, it's all military stuff.
Yeah, it's all military. Belt
but they're Spartans over there. But what I saw, I tested them a couple of times. I said, you're not going to get anywhere with Trump, because it was all Trump-centric. You gave a very logical and good historical analysis. That's not what they're interested in. They're interested in Trump, okay? And I said, the first thing you have to do is knock out the fentanyl, okay? And you have to knock it out. And they go, well, we are, but the precursor. I said, I don't want to hear precursor. And remember that this was translated. They had the little things, and because half the room spoke English, half didn't. But the instant translation, I said, I don't want to hear precursor. You don't need fentanyl. You don't need any of it. Knock it out. Give President Trump that. That's where you start. You don't need to be in bed with Putin. And I warned them about Putin. I said, you can try to be his friend, but he'll turn on you like a snake. You don't need to be cutting up to the mullahs. Okay? United States will supply your energy needs in a much more benign way. They could not answer any of those things, Professor. None.
Yeah.
And I just laid it out. I said, if you're gonna consort with bad guys, evil guys, then that's what the label you're gonna get. Why do you need it? You don't need it. It doesn't help you. And that was the thrust of the 90 minutes.
Yeah, I think the Trump, and I can't speak for them, and you know them better than I do, but I think they're in this narrow Soviet, Russia, China, American relationship. They're trying to have a Kissinger paradigm where China is no better friend to Russia than it is to us. Russia is no better friend or enemy, whatever, to China than it is to us, and triangulate and check power, because they have historic animosities, China and Russia.
Oh, yeah.
And for some reason, the Ukrainian, I think we're in a period of a real problem because they are in an alignment. But it's going to be very hard for any Chinese communist leader, as it is for Putin in a dictatorial, but even more so, I think, when you have an totalitarian ideology. Putin is kind of like a dictator that makes it up as he goes along ideologically. But whether it's Iran that is ideological and totalitarian, or China, it's very hard for those leaders to compromise their ideology because they have a whole group of people surrounding them that don't respond to the same incentives as either Western democracies or dictatorships where they...
I'll tell you what, there wasn't a lot of love for Putin or Iran in that room. They don't care about the Ukraine, the Chinese, and they don't care about Gaza. Okay, but there wasn't a lot. You got to be in shape, by the way, to go on these trips. That Great Wall was some kind of wall. As you know, the Great Wall, listen to this. This is, to me, the most spectacular place to visit in the world. It's better than the pyramids. And I've seen all the pyramids. So the Ming Dynasty built the wall, 1368 to 1644. It was a 300-year experience. It goes more than 13,000 miles of this wall, okay? 400,000 people were killed in the 300 years building a wall because it's way up on a mountain. I don't know how they even got the stuff up there. It's you see it. And the Chinese government, that's their big tourist thing. They keep it in good shape. But I did about half what you could have done. My son did more. He's a lacrosse player. His legs are in better shape. But I was just in awe of how human beings could do this. Now, they built the wall originally because of the Mongol warriors on horseback coming in and doing all kinds of stuff like the Vikings did in Ireland and England. Same thing. But I'll tell you what, I've been 86 countries now, seen it all. That was the most impressive attraction I've seen on this earth. So we're glad we're back. No place like home, right? No place like the USA. Thank you for watching and listening to the No Spin News. We'll see you tomorrow.